Hey, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar, The Digital Grocery Outlook, the Year of Irrevocable Inflection. The three-part digital benchmark webinar series is presented by Winsight Grocery Business and Incisiv, along with our title sponsors, Mercatus, Buy, and Shopper Kit. I'm John Springer, Executive Editor of Winsight Grocery Business, and I'll be your moderator for today's event. Our speakers today are Sylvain Perrier, President and CEO of Mercatus, Jeff Baskin, Executive Vice President of Global Partnerships for Radius Networks, Jack Record, CEO and founder of Shopper Kit, and David Winans, co-founder and Chief Customer Officer for Incisiv. I'll now turn it over to David, who will be kicking off today's presentation. Take it away, David.
John, thanks so much. Good afternoon or morning to everyone, depending on where you are. I'm really excited for today's session, and we have a great group of industry experts that will provide some context and color for some of the findings that we had in the second annual report around digital grocery maturity. So have a lot to get through. Guys, I'm, like I said, excited to have this conversation with you, but I wanted to jump in a little bit and lay some context for today's session. So first and foremost, I wanted to just give you a quick overview of kind of what we benchmarked. So this year, we benchmarked 90 grocery retailers or banners, if you will, in US, Canada, and Western Europe. These grocery banners were selected based on annual revenue, pretty simple metric to use there, so that the top 90 revenue-wise. And we benchmarked close to 200 attributes for each of the banners. This actually was, we added, last year we had right around 145, 150. So we added quite a significant number of attributes this year. But as you all know on the line, this industry has gone through a massive amount of a change this year. And there's a lot of new functionalities and things that have been added. So we felt it necessary to look at some additional functionalities and attributes to put this report in. So, and this also we used a report or a study that we did with our partner Mercatus we released about 2 weeks ago with 60,000 shoppers. And so we used some of that data to help lay the context for this report. So wanted to just kind of give you a quick overview of some of the industry facts that we have laid context for, and really wanted to start with this, this, which I think about every analyst firm out there has put out some number in terms of what is the difference in growth and projected growth from e-commerce sales as it relates to grocery. So for the algorithm that we developed, you see here the line in red was kind of anticipated growth pre-COVID, which was online grocery as a percentage of overall sales. So and then you see here the green line, which had a direct curve up this year, and then we expect, while there may be certainly some percentage of folks once everything gets back to normal that will go back to their traditional in-store shopping behaviors, it's going to continue to grow and continue to be a greater part of the overall industry. So from the algorithm and the analysis we did, we anticipate online grocery to be about 60% higher than it was with the kind of original projections. Here is an interesting data point, which basically, as we know, there's been massive growth in online shopping. And in fact, 43% of shoppers have shopped online in the last 6 months. But one of the data points we got out of the shopper study we did is that really only 26% have shopped online with their preferred grocery retailer. So a little bit of a dichotomy and a difference there. And Sylvain, since we kind of partnered on this study together, were you surprised by this, and why do you think these figures are as such?
Yeah, actually, to say the least, I wasn't surprised, and I'm not surprised when I see these numbers over and over again. The reality is at the height of the pandemic, consumers were really faced with tough choices. A lot of the preferred retailer did not have stock availability or did not have a time slot for them to either pick up their groceries or have them delivered. So they just kind of jumped ship and went to the next retailer that would have some form of availability. And that kind of cascaded through.
Yeah, that's a good point for sure. I think The industry overall had to make some, incredible changes in a very short period of time, and a lot of folks were kind of getting used to some of what the new normal was or the new environment was back in March, April, May. So good points there. So this is a chart that we put out last year, and we looked at it again this year. So this is a 5-year CAGR chart, and I don't know that this is a surprise, but I think it's a compelling data point, which is over the last 5 years, the more digitally mature the grocer, the higher their average annual growth. So as you see here, it's 2.2 times higher than their competitive. So that top green tier. If you are more mature, therefore you are, benefiting from greater growth. And for again, probably not surprising to anybody, for Q2 2020, which is the height of the pandemic, the most digitally mature retailers grew 19%, or 2.5 times the average. So direct correlation with digital maturity and growth makes a ton of sense, right? If folks were ready to handle the volumes of online and handle the volumes of fulfilling from stores and things like that, then more naturally, as Sylvain just pointed out, then folks will migrate to those grocers. So wanted to get in, so with that context laid, I want to get into kind of the heart of the discussion here today, which is really looking at the areas that we benchmarked, and then have a discussion around why certain areas are important, and certainly the panelists get their feedback and opinions as to what grocers can do to enable more maturity and therefore more growth. So on the upper section here, you see these are the 4 areas, again, consistent with 2019, that we benchmarked in terms of the buyer journey. So research and discovery, ease of ordering, fulfillment, customer engagement, and service. The numbers in green represent the attributes that we benchmarked last year, and then the numbers in red are the numbers that we added this year over and above. So overall, shoppers have been relatively patient with the industry. I think they understand that a lot changed, and they've been happy with the moves that a lot of grocers have made in terms of helping them to ensure they have food for their families, and et cetera, et cetera. However, as it relates to the overall kind of retail industry, satisfaction is still less mature in grocery than it is in other segments. So I know this is kind of a big chart to kind of dissect. So I'm not going to spend too much time on it because I want to get into the discussion, but just wanted to point out that in certain areas around each of the 4 segments of the buyer journey, that there's still a long way to go in terms of maturity. So let's get into the first segment, which is research and discovery. So the way we've kind of broken this out in terms of A, the discussion, and B, if you all look to download the report, et cetera, is so on the left column here, we try to point out capabilities in each of the areas where we saw kind of the greatest adoption and growth year on year. And then on the right column is areas where we didn't really see a lot of maturation. We didn't see a lot of folks that were, that have added these capabilities. And some, it may not be as big a deal, and others, we think it's been a miss. But really, what I wanted to point out here is, search capabilities are really as much about the data as it is the platform. We found several instances where different grocery chains were actually on the same commerce platform, but really had wildly different levels of maturity. And this is really because the more mature chains really are looking at the process. They're looking at, they're more effective at developing proper taxonomies, offering more advanced filters such as, weight or dietary restrictions like gluten-free, et cetera. And they've really spent more time cleaning their data. So that was a big kind of finding that we had is really in this particular portion of the buyer journey, it's really about the data. So As it relates to kind of what the prioritizations are, and again, I'll just briefly explain because this is going to be consistent throughout the presentation, is on the left-hand column, these are really table stakes that customers expect. And then on the right-hand column, differentiating capabilities that customers, really value. And for search, research and discovery, really what we found, and this is also including some of the information we got from the shopper study, that shoppers are really looking for more extensive capabilities around search and filtering. But that's, from a shopper perspective. And then from, I want to pull Sylvain into this because this is an area where he, does a lot of work and Mercatus does a lot of work. So in your opinion, Sylvain, kind of what functionalities do you think are the most important in this particular section of the buyer journey? And kind of it's part two to that is what do your clients typically ask for when you're working with them?
Yeah, when you think of search, searching for food is very different than if you're trying to buy a new laptop because there's so many characteristics that you can put in a search function for a new laptop. For example, 17-inch screen, so on and so on. But when you're searching for ketchup, there's not that much you can put in terms of descriptors. There's a limited amount. So we see search, kind of those best practices, autocomplete is table stakes, but even more important than that is interlacing a form of personalization. So if I'm logging into a web experience for a given retailer, it would make sense that if I search for a general term, that at the very least, the results being presented back to me are more personalized to me. Spelling mistakes are critical, but even more than that, there's the notion of interlacing regional dialects. There are certain words in parts of the country people use to describe products, and sometimes those are very much left to the wayside. And words that describe a specific brand or a category of products. In terms of what our clients are asking or what the industry is asking is data curation and best practices around product categorization. Because I think the reality is that if you're a merchant, how you merchandise your store, how you categorize your products in brick and mortar may or may not easily apply in the world of online. An example of that would be frozen strawberries. Does that belong in the frozen section or does it belong in the fruit section? And there are different schools of thoughts. I think the reality is you have to think like a consumer and to build an experience that puts the consumer at the center of that.
Good point. So that said, I maybe put your consumer hat on and maybe give the audience kind of a definition. How do you see kind of the ideal homepage in a kind of an online grocery environment?
Yeah. So what we're seeing more so today, the reality is that online shopping is becoming very utilitarian in the sense that what you put on your website needs to immediately lead to a conversion, i.e. somebody building their basket. What we're seeing out there in the industry today, if you were to look at your total traffic coming to your website, we're seeing 3 to 7% conversion. People actually going through the process of building a basket and checking out. The easier you make the homepage, whether it's something that's on sale that can be added to the basket, that leads to conversion. That leads to more of a frictionless experience, and that's the best route to take if you're a retailer.
That's a good point. We'll get into that a little bit later as it relates to promotions, because that did come out in our previous study as kind of a big ask and need and kind of missed opportunity on the shopper side of it. So interesting feedback on search and discovery, and I think we kind of reflected the same sentiment around data and taxonomies and things like that. Wanted to point out here, so we are listing by category who the leaders are, and that little green number down inside the phone, the top number is desktop or computer-based or online pages, and then that little mobile phone is kind of the mobile app. So you see here that Target is number one in search and discovery. They're one of the few retailers out there that offer a search filter for in-store pickup option. So that really helped them catapult into their leadership role there. You see, then we have Swiss Retailer Co-op, Tesco, Morrison's, BJ's, and Brookshire. So let's hop into the next section, which is online ordering. So here, if you look in terms of online ordering, we actually did see, this is one area we saw some of the strongest adoption in certain attributes. So you see here on the left, you have really nice growth in the ability for shoppers to reorder, previous see order history, and then digital receipts of after having been in the industry for something like 20 years, digital receipts are finally getting a much broader adoption out there. And what we did find overall as it relates to the online ordering part of the journey is that grocery retailers really have streamlined and a nice job with their checkout process compared to 2019. So they've reduced the number of steps, made it easier to check out, and that's ultimately a solid area of growth for the industry. As I alluded to just previously, shoppers do want easy access to promotions, both on the homepage and at checkout. And while we did see some good growth on promotion visibility, you see it's still pretty low as it relates to the overall number of folks offering that in the industry. So from a prioritization perspective, and you see here, table stakes around order and order fulfillment, differentiating capabilities. Really, it comes down to offering the right information at every stage, and that means integrating the product pages and the cart with inventory availability, integrating with loyalty programs and areas around personalization, and certainly fulfillment, and that will really help kind of drive speed and urgency of purchase. So want to pull in a couple of our other panelists. I know it feels like you've been probably sitting here for a long time. Hope you're awake with us. But Jack, I really want to, on this inventory piece I just mentioned, I really want to, kind of pull you in and get your thoughts and really how can grocery retailers really best match in-store inventory with online product display pages. This has been an area that's difficult, so I'd love to get your feedback on that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. Part of me, asks, is it really an e-commerce question? Out of stocks are an industry issue, somewhere between 8 and 10% across the industry. So if somebody comes into the store and the Folgers coffee isn't on the shelf, they make a real-time decision to get the light roast or the dark roast, or they'll text back home and say, "Hey, hon, they don't have the item that we want. Should I get something else?" And they resolve that issue. There is a tendency for grocers, particularly, to want to solve the out-of-stock issue as part of the e-grocery experience. And it's because, if you try to treat e-grocery like a general merchandise e-commerce rollout, there's a mismatch there. You're not delivering from warehouses. Your grocery stores are high-moving environments. They're changing constantly, not only from an inventory perspective, but from a display perspective, from a location perspective. So it's not to say that out-of-stocks aren't something that grocers should be looking at and trying to solve. But it is to say making that part of the e-grocery challenge is too much. It just doesn't make, we've done this before being supply chain people, and the juice just isn't worth the squeeze, especially when you go down the path of conversational commerce, when you're actually conversing with your online guest about substitutions. In a lot of ways, this is an opportunity. We actually see an increase in basket size when there's a level of communication on an order. So the story is very much getting a text from the store saying, "We're out of the Folgers original. Would you like the light roast or the dark roast?" You respond, you say yes, you say no. We've solved the substitution challenge in a very elegant way. Out of stock is no longer an issue. And what we're left with is a customer who wants to talk to us to say, "Oh, by the way, since I've got you, I forgot to add diapers, or I forgot to add paper towels, or the dog needs food." So we see a 3 to 5% uptick in basket size anytime there's a level of conversational commerce, anytime there's a level of communication on an order, and right now, almost all of that starts with the substitution, right? Most of the grocers out there haven't matured enough to start doing outbound type of basket size increase or CRM work. So this is a very reactionary increase in basket size that we see. So I think out of stocks are something to look at. Making them part of the e-grocery journey when it's already large enough, it doesn't make much sense to me to lump it into that effort.
No, that's good. That's a great point. And it is an age old issue. But I think ultimately as grocery becomes a larger percentage of overall sales, your comments around the ability to communicate in real time, boy, that can remove a lot of friction points too.
Sure.
I think it's a great point.
It's a service too, right? It creates a lot of value in the relationship.
Yeah, we'll touch on that. Yeah, we'll touch on that in the customer engagement and service piece. So good feedback there. In terms of Sylvain, I want to pull you back in here for a sec because as I've alluded to a couple of times, the promotions piece of it has been certainly from the shopper's perspective a need and a recommended improvement from the grocer side of it. Do you think that grocers are maybe deliberately making it difficult to see promotions for online ordering, or is it something else?
No, it's actually quite the opposite. And majority of the retailers that are out there today are really concerned about, displaying the weekly circular, displaying all the different promotional types that they offer inside their stores online. I think, the challenge being in a state of a pandemic, there's this heightened awareness from a consumer's perspective. Are my discounts being applied? And the harsh reality is a lot of the e-commerce platforms that are out there for grocery retail are once, if not twice, removed from the point of sale system and from the promotional engines that exist. So the cart total that's displayed online is an estimate, and it doesn't necessarily all apply the discounts that could be achieved through coupons, through the weekly circulars. You combine that with the harsh reality of lack of availability of product inside the stores, and sometimes a higher than normal substitution rate. So there becomes this variance in the hands of the consumer when they see the final total versus what was estimated online. And they kind of feel, well, listen, maybe my discounts, aren't being applied, and I'm not seeing everything that's available on promotion.
Right. Yeah, it's a big challenge. I think it probably can be a session in and of itself. So thanks for that.
Absolutely,
Jeff. I want to pull you in. Kind of it's not directly promotion related, but it's kind of along the same vein, which is, there's been a lot of discussion out in the market or the industry regarding, with the growth in curbside and with the growth in, buy online and pick up, what's happening to the impulse buys and those types of things. Would love to get your feedback on that. It kind of ties into the promotions a little bit.
Yeah, sure. And I think, a lot of our impulse buys traditionally are at the aisle, the checkout aisle. So CPGs and grocers are really losing money during COVID, as according to your study, there's 370% increase in customers are using curbside pickup. So that's a lot of people that are not standing in line, reading People magazine, or having their kids pull Hershey bars off the shelf. So for those typical impulse purchases. So understanding the customer's location and using mobile as a way to bring the aisle to the curb is really, really important. And if you can present those, potential impulse buys prior to them pulling up, or during their journey to the store, or once they get to the curbside spot, you really have a good opportunity to get some of that aisle revenue back by making it really easy to purchase via mobile at the curb. Good points indeed. It's. I think the impulse buy or the even with mobile and the ability to shoot a text, say, your order will be ready in 5 minutes. Do you want a Coke with that? Those types of things. Good, good practices for. So keeping you on the hook here, Jeff. I know Jack touched on it a little bit, but I wanted to just get an understanding from you because this whole communications piece. How can retailers ensure that they're really communicating the shipping and delivery, messages accurately to the shopper,
Love to get your feedback there.
Yeah, as we layer in and bring in new technology, into these stores, communication is really crucial. So as many retailers now, from a curbside perspective, are getting rid of call boxes and trying to remove friction by removing texting or having them call to communicate to the store, having not someone pick up, or having them send a text to the store. It's really important. As soon as the customer arrives at the store, we want to automatically communicate to them with a welcome message. So with instructions. So, welcome to Lowe's Foods, please proceed to the curbside pickup area. And so that they're getting that as soon as they arrive when they arrive at the store. And also when they arrive in the pickup area, because that's even more important, because they're not now having to text or have a call box or do anything to communicate to the store that they're there. So we want to communicate to the customer that they have that ability. That's also a potential opportunity, what we just talked about from an impulse buy of having that two-way communication back and forth. And there's no need to take action, to let the store know that they've arrived. So if you look at early studies, like, from when Amazon Go stores, first launched, they had customers that would get their items and they would start to walk out the door, and then they would stop. And they would stop because they're used to paying for something, checking out, doing something like that. And now customers are just walking out of the store. So with putting new technology in to make it a frictionless process, you have to make sure that the communication is there so that they understand that because we're making this much easier on you, they're going to use the technology. That's making it much easier for them and the staff inside the store.
Yeah, a good point there, Jeff, is that most of this is automated, right? So you're setting up communication triggers that happen based on where the customer is, based on geolocation. So this is an entire process that the digital teams, the marketing teams can tailor specifically for the brands, especially around the impulse buy at last mile, but also the operational things that happen when the customer's on the way to the store. Curbside flyby lets shopper kit know the guest is on the way, 5 minutes out. That kicks off a whole processes inside the store to unstage, to load. It also kicks off a whole marketing opportunity from a communication perspective to say, go here, be here at this time. But also, we know you've got 3 kids in the car. Should we add a few waters and a couple Kind bars? So that impulse buy is really interesting right there.
Yeah, and obviously we're seeing a pretty consistent thread throughout this is comms communication. So it's critical, and and now that the buyer journey is a little bit more touchless and contactless, then we have to find ways to insert ourselves but not be too intrusionary. So all good, really good feedback. So you see the leaders here on online ordering. BJ's was number 1 last year. They're number 1 this year. So they do a really nice job. And that in Publix has seen some really nice adoption, which we'll get into in a little bit. Fulfillment. So fulfillment is an area that, obviously has seen explosive, massive growth in 2020. 8 months ago, curbside and buy online, pick up in store in grocery was, not much of a conversation, but certainly that has completely changed. And, this is an area where grocers that I alluded to earlier have done a really nice job adding the capabilities. But it always hasn't been done profitably. I think usually it's been at the expense of profitability early on, just because they're just trying to be out and offer the service and be a good steward of the community. To provide essential items for a country that has, or a world for that matter, that has, that has gone through an unprecedented time. So I want to jump into this, and we have some, real experts in this area. So, so you see here that that this is really an area that where excuse me 1 second. I might have. Okay, here we go. Got it. An area where, for us, like I said, we saw massive growth, and you see, there's some of the bigger retailers are leading in this area. But this is an area, and both Jack and Jeff alluded to, where kind of, a pretty clear opportunity is communication, something like a live chat. really provide that ability to to provide customer service and therefore improve conversion. And there's certainly those areas that later on we will certainly grow in that area. So from a fulfillment perspective, kind of what do you recommend? Jack, I'll let you go first. Kind of some of the main areas around fulfillment that you see as critical and important.
Yeah. I think we're going to do a whole webinar on this. There's a 3-part series. And just to touch, I think the thing that you mentioned first is profitability, right? So what Sylvan does with Mercatus is create the basket on the front end that really pulls the online guest into the brand of the grocer. The same reason someone shops inside of a grocery store should be the same reasons that they shop with them online. It's about quality. It's about service. It's a very deep-seated feeling, emotion in humanity. And we feel very different about our food than we do any other merchandise. So he's creating an environment that someone can walk into and feel very much like they're in the store. What we want to do in fulfillment is extend that brand to the online guest. And we want to do it profitably. And really, there's 2 things to be thinking about right off the bat. The first is that you're now, as a grocer, paying someone to do what your customer used to do for free. Your customer would come to the store, they'd walk the aisles, and they would pick their food. So picking is a part of fulfillment. By no means is picking the entirety of fulfillment, but so the first thing to think about here is reducing labor costs. I'm now paying someone to do this. So coming out of the warehouse, we want to do things like multi-order picking. We want to do things like zone picking, optimize pick paths. We want to incorporate our service counters. So deli, meat, seafood are all part of that fulfillment process so that we're maximizing our units per hour. We're maximizing our orders per day. Speed, accuracy, efficiencies are all huge parts of reducing the labor costs. That's never going to get you to profitability because that's always going to be a cost center. So the flip side of the profitability coin, while we're focused on becoming razor sharp around reducing labor costs and operations, we want to incorporate the other side of the world where operations and logistics are focused on the reduction of cost, digital, commerce, loyalty, IT, development. They're all part of the second phase, which is increasing basket size. How do we bring that online guest into the store virtually so that we can tell them about BOGOs, so that we have a butcher who can actually tell them about the cuts of meat that they like or that the fruit that's in season that the family buys? They're not in the store right now and they don't know that it's there. So getting a text saying, hey, the peaches look great right now and I know the family likes peaches, those all add to increasing basket size as the order is being shopped. And it's very lightweight and very light touch because it's all texting. We're not getting phone calls or emails, very real time. And the people appreciate that. That creates a level of trust. When you extend your brand, you increase basket size. What you also do is create barriers to entry from the companies like the Amazons and Walmarts of the world who want to commoditize this entire experience. They want to deliver your food in a tote from a warehouse done by the airport, and they want to try to schedule it as cleanly as they can. And in America, in particular, people are saying, listen, we're cool with getting that in our computers and our shoes and all the other merchandise that we get from you. But for our food, I go to the store on 3rd Street and I know the butcher there and I know the fruit there. That's where I want to get my groceries. And the grocers now have the technology, commercial technology. This is not something they need to build, that they can implement to, 1, handle the fulfillment side, but 2, handle the customer experience, conversational commerce, increasing of basket size. That's really how you get to profitability in this business.
Yeah, good points. Really good points, actually. Jeff, anything you want to add to that, just as it relates to kind of the last mile on the fulfillment side?
Yeah, sure. As Jack mentioned, labor is the largest expense that these grocers have in trying to make these kind of new methods happen. So, the less amount of people we need to hire, the better for that profitability. But so, an order for pickup or curbside is growing 4 times faster than delivery, and curbside naturally being more profitable than delivery because I don't have the expense of the delivery driver. The more profitable that program is. So if you can create an extremely, efficient process for staff inside that allows them to prioritize, the picking process and then the delivery process to out to the curb, the more profit you're going to be able to generate. So, again, having them being able to multitask and using a system like ShopperKit to walk the aisles and be picking groceries and being able to be alerted that someone is outside, and then being able to kind of, say, hey, you know what, this person's not coming for an hour. I'm now going to take care of this customer. The better off I'm going to be. And from a delivery perspective, delivery is expensive, but if you have these last mile delivery players, and there's a lot of them out there now, if you can figure out, a rules engine, and this is something that, that is offered by us and companies like Delivery Solutions and others, is, I want to figure out what's the best DSP or delivery service provider that I can use to make it more profitable for my store, but also provide the best customer experience. And then, you create a rules engine that helps you do that, and run an algorithm that says more profit, better customer experience. I'm going to use this DSP for that. So there's all these things that you can do to help, add technology to make it more profitable.
Yeah, it's an all the above approach, right, Jeff? So,
right.
Last mile, through gig economy and curbside. We see the customers that we share together, of which there are several. We see a huge push and a move by the customer towards curbside. There was some reticence there to begin with, because I think what people were thinking was, man, I got to pull into the parking lot. I got to spend 15 minutes looking for a spot. It's going to take me, 10, 20 minutes to get in and out of this place. I have the kids in the car. We're seeing sub 3-minute pickup times right now. And for a customer who passes the store on average 3 times a day, 90% of grocery customers pass their local store 3 times a day, in and out in 5 minutes on the way home from work feels a lot cleaner and easier to me than having to wait an hour at my house in a window that may or may not show up, especially during COVID. Now somebody else has got my groceries in their car, taking it to my home. There's a whole drop-off paradigm that has to be figured out. So we're really seeing the market start to adopt the curbside aspect of things because it's easier, and ultimately it's actually, as you said, more profitable, because you're not the days of delivery economics haven't changed in delivery since the days of web van, right? I mean, that's still a tough place to make money. So getting the customer to come in and out of the parking lot in a seamless way seems to be what the grocers want, but more importantly, what we're seeing is what the guests want.
Yeah, right. No, it's good, and the grocery, the industry by and large has gotten a lot better in the last 6 months, because early on there were all sorts of challenges with slot availability, and I might, if you did curbside, there was a spot in 10 days or something, and we had lots of feedback around that. That pretty much has been solved at this point. So, so really good point. So, and one of the data points in the previous slide was around just there has been a pretty massive growth in terms of offering free delivery with a certain minimum buy. Sylvain, is there the question is free delivery a table stake now, or is it something that will continue? What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think service fees for the sake of offsetting something is a bit of a slippery slope. I think the harsh reality is, when I speak to retailers in the market, they actually feel very compelled to offer $0 for curbside, $0 for delivery fees, because they're competing against Walmart. And it's easy for Walmart to subsidize, simply because their basket is typically of higher margin. And so what we try to recommend to the retailers is look at it as a tiered model. So, for example, if someone spends north of $75, then maybe it's 50% of a service fee. If it's over $100, maybe it's $0. And I also encourage retailers to get really creative with their service fees. And this is an interesting idea, is, maybe the shopping trip today is brought to you by Coca-Cola, and Coke subsidize the service fee, and you get, a 2-liter of Coke in your basket. And I think that becomes a little bit more creative. And the reality is, both Jeff and Jack have touched, the majority of the expenditure is on the labor, and that's really what needs to be tackled first.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's a pretty cool idea. some of the shopper marketing money is now going to help fund curbside. Love it. That's great stuff. So on the fulfillment side, I do want to work, because I know it's an area that we're seeing a lot of growth in, and I think there's certainly a willingness amongst the shoppers to just to get an understanding from a comms perspective, this concept of location aware technologies. So the grocers knowing where the shopper is en route, and can help kind of plan their schedule. So tell me a little bit, Jeff. I know that's kind of area of expertise for you. Can you talk a little bit about how location aware technologies are really helping grocers along this journey?
Sure. Yeah. Right now we work with obviously heavy into grocery and work with big box retailers as well as restaurants. And the biggest difference is that most grocers today have some form of curbside pickup. However, most of it's really clunky, meaning that I pull up, I have like a call box that someone may or may not answer. I have to call the store. Again, they may or may not answer depending on where they are. So there's a lot of friction for the customer. I've got to do a lot of things, from the customer to do that. And by the time I get a hold of someone, minutes have gone by. And as many people know, especially these days, people aren't that patient, especially when shopping. But the biggest benefit to the location aware technology is operationally, as I mentioned earlier. So if I'm an associate inside the store and I can multitask and receive alerts as to the customer's location when they're on their way to the store, I can now prioritize different things that I'm doing, whether that's picking groceries or sweeping the floor. So if Sylvain is my customer, I know that he's 15 minutes away. That operationally for me, that might not mean anything. Meaning that I know he's 50 minutes away, I can continue what I'm doing. But as soon as I get an alert that Sylvain is 5 minutes away, that might be my cue that I need to start prioritizing Sylvain, because he's the customer that's the priority at that point. And I need to destage his order. I need to go get everything from the freezer and combine it with everything in the ambient section and combine it into one cart. And typically by the time I do that, I should get another alert that Sylvain has now arrived in the parking lot, and then potentially another alert of exactly when and where the customer is in one of multiple curbside zone or parking spots in the store. And so this allows the retailer, without adding, again, as I mentioned earlier, without adding labor, to be more efficient and also meet the customer at the curb as soon as they arrive. So if I'm a customer, and as Jack just mentioned, if I can pull up and have someone meet me there with my groceries, that's a pretty incredible experience, and I'm going to continue to do that. And the studies have shown that if your customers wait less than 2 minutes, you're 4 times more likely to return. There's a real ROI story there if you can do this right. And I think the most interesting stat that I saw in the study, and there's a lot of really good stats, obviously, but the 43% of shoppers have shopped online in the last 6 months, and only 26% have done so at their preferred grocery retailer. That means that, to me at least, means that people are going shopping at their current or their primary grocery store, had a bad experience, and switched. And I don't think a lot of grocers actually realize this. I don't think they know that it's happening, because during COVID, their revenues have increased, 50 to 100%. But curbside pickup has increased 370%. So while their revenues continue to increase, they don't realize that they're still missing out on huge opportunities elsewhere where they could have even higher revenues.
Yep. No, that's awesome. Yeah, good point. Good point. Sure. So this is an area that we deem, I think all of us collectively as a group deem is extremely important, which is hence the reason we're doing a deep dive on this for the second webinar in this series. That's in a couple of weeks. So, like I said, there's another dozen questions or so we could ask on this, but I'm going to move forward in the interest of time. And like I said, everybody tune into that second webinar, because I think it's really an area that deserves the attention of having its own session. So the last part of the buyer journey really is kind of that customer engagement and service element of it. And ultimately, this is an area that actually this is the one area of all of them that we found that the European grocers actually were more mature than the U.S. based grocers. And I only point that out is that it's important for U.S. based grocers to understand that all the things that we've been talking about around contactless and frictionless. As if assuming those trends move forward in terms of providing a more frictionless experience, those touch points become less so, and therefore customer engagement in digitally become more important. And we've touched on it several times around things like live chat and that ability to be able to communicate in a real-time basis, and also be able to implement tools that offer greater personalization and recommendations. That's all part of that kind of customer engagement and service perspective. So you see here, there has been a fair amount of growth. Something like policies, while it doesn't really seem maybe it would be kind of a big area of customer engagement. Certainly, when folks are scared and they kind of revert back to the lowest level of the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, understanding things like what their abilities are, the policies around pickup and returns, all that kind of stuff is important to shoppers. So as you see here, from a differentiating capability, this on-demand and personalized recommendations, again, all things that we've been talking about throughout this session. But just high level, Sylvain, I'd love to get your feedback in terms of how do you see the definition of customer engagement changing going forward, even post-pandemic?
Yeah, I think what we're going to see is a rationalization of features to conversion to ROI. So I think we've been so focused for the last few years of jamming every piece of functionality we can think of in a user experience without really understanding what's the return on investment in the development cycle and the usage cycle. An example would be shopping lists. Shopping lists are used less than by 1% of people, but we put so much time and effort into them. For what reason? I don't think we can answer that question in 10 minutes. But I think there needs to be this streamlined, concentrated effort to say, hey, let's just focus on the things that were going to drive revenue for us.
Good call out. Yeah, for sure. And that's how you see, just from a customer engagement perspective, really, do you think that grocers should, in looking at that, how do you think they should really, do you think that's through their own internal shopper studies in terms of what's important, or is it, how do you see them understanding what's truly important to the shopper?
Yeah, I like to take a page out of Okado's book, who just recently launched here in Canada with Sobeys. I mean, the website is extremely efficient. You can build a basket of 50 items in under 8 minutes. Very quick, easy to use. It doesn't do a lot, the website, and it doesn't need to. And I think I see this future focus on the usage side being driven that way. Considering that, if you look at take an average retailer website seeing 100,000 people, unique people on a monthly basis, only 5 to 8% are driving the e-commerce revenue. So focus on those people, focus on growing their baskets, and focus on converting people. I don't think you need to be everything and anything. Do what's going to drive revenue for you. And then back to Jack and Jeff's point, minimize your labor costs, increase your efficiency.
Got it. Interesting. Okay. One of the things we found in our previous study, Sylvain, was that actually, because we updated a study from 2018 to this year, and one of the things we uncovered, which was a little interesting, was that the willingness to, while shoppers want to have a more personalized experience, their willingness to share personal data actually went down year on year. So that kind of begs the question, kind of where do you see, from a personalization perspective, where do you see that line between helpful and perhaps intrusionary?
Yeah, I think personalization should be used in this moments of being able to delight a customer. An example of this could be, did you forget the following? You purchased this last week, or would you be interested in the following? And you have to pepper it through the user experience. I think when you're consistently personalizing content and you're trying to forcibly upsell and cross-sell and drive basket size, that's where it can get very intrusive, especially if you're inferring products that people are likely to buy based on their preferences and based on their historical purchases. That's where it can get concerning and a bit strange. And let's be honest here. The privacy laws in California have tightened with CCPA. There are 14 copycat states that are going to follow into the realm of CCPA. So I think this is a time that we really need to figure this out.
Yeah, and Europe is already there, right? So, GDPR and all that kind of stuff. It's been like that for a while. So, yeah, so
correct.
Good points. And I'm going to wrap up this section. You touched on it, Jack, but I just wanted to get you touched on this concept of virtual assistants, not widely adopted right now, pretty low across most, across all brands. But where do you see virtual assistants going from the perspective of integrations, et cetera?
Yeah, I think it's more branded communication, and it's automated. So there, you have your people speaking to your guests, but they're guided by systems that do things like templatized texting, the libraries that were created by grocers' marketing teams to extend the brand. Virtual assistants. The thing that grocers have to do is take ownership of their fulfillment process so that their customer knows that they're being taken care of by the grocer, but they need to do it in such a way that reduces labor cost or maximizes efficiencies. This is what we're talking about here. We're not trying to lower headcount. We're trying to get the most value for every dollar that we spend on labor, and guiding those people in how to communicate and what to say to the online guest at the right time is what technology should be doing. And that's what we do. We empower the folks to fulfill, and they do it in such a way that it extends the brand. Because the reality is, once this becomes a commoditized, if you could virtualize this, if you could automate this, and you could make it a commoditized business versus a branded experience, then you're going to lose the game to Amazon and Walmart and the other big guys, because they can spend more money on commoditization. It becomes about price, and that's the only competitive differentiator. You're in big trouble. So it's definitely about your people leveraging technology that's available today to extend a very customized branded experience to the online guest in an automated way. And a lot of the times, I mean, between ShopperKit and Flyby, almost 95% of that communication is automated, and it's created by the marketing teams at the grocers to really have a very tailored experience to their online guests.
Yeah. Okay. No, that's good definition there. So actually, there's a question here that, and I'll just throw it out now because it's timely, which is, what is the difference between live chat and a shopping assistant?
Yeah, I can handle that. So during the fulfillment process, when the conversation is happening, so the order is being shopped, live chat is actually somebody in the aisle kind of typing with their thumbs. That's kind of the beta basic version of live chat. What you really want is that person, and they're talking about substitutions, they're talking about add-ons, they're talking about impulse buys. That person should be armed with pre-populated templates that come from the grocer's marketing team, from their commerce team. So they're not tapping away with their thumbs. They're actually selecting branded communication templates that they're then sent real time back and forth between the guests. These are threaded conversations. So if the guest doesn't reply in real time and somebody else needs to pick up the conversation on the team, they can do that. Shopping assistant, to me, there are bots out there, and we can talk about those down the line, and maybe that'll come up in the next webinar. But for me, shopping assistance is when we're out of an item, we know in our fulfillment platform what was chosen on the Mercatus side. So if a customer placed an order and then they said, hey, listen, if we're out of this order, these are the 4 substitutions we'll accept. That's a shopping assistant to me. We'll feed the in-store associate one of those pre-selected items. If nothing was pre-selected, we've got AI-driven smart substitutions. So based on previous shopping history, based on CPG information, there's a billion different parameters that go into that. We have actually a smart substitution driven. So we're trying to empower that in-store associate who's doing the fulfillment effort to have the most relevant branded communication, as well as the most relevant data points for items, specials, BOGOs, substitutions, et cetera. So that, I don't know if that made it was a clear, live chat versus shopping assistant. Not really my words, but I think the idea is to make the guest feel like they have a concierge, someone taking care of them in their local store that they know and love. And we need to empower that person through technology to give the best experience.
Oh, awesome. I think it's a great description. Good stuff. All right. So I'm going to touch very quickly on the leaderboard. I would encourage everybody to download the report to get the kind of the full data. We're coming up on time here, and I want to get to a couple of questions. So just want to point out a couple of things here. So hope you can see this. I know it's pretty tight, but pretty interesting year. And having benchmark data from last year certainly adds a level of robustness and richness to seeing how the industry has progressed. Some big call outs. Obviously, Tesco, you see here, jump from 30 to number 1. So significant jump year on year. And that was, and I will point out that if a grocer fell in the rankings, it wasn't because they took away functionality. It was because their competition added significantly more. So there is no scenario by which somebody dropped in rank and because they took away, they had curbside and now they don't have it. It was really because the rest of the industry kind of, rising tide raises all boats kind of scenario. But Tesco, number 1, they added things like, delivery subscription. They added a comprehensive loyalty program with deals and coupons. They were very clear in terms of their policies around in-store pickup, delivery, and tracking, et cetera. So they had a nice jump. Another retailer, Publix, down here in Florida, where I am, had a nice significant jump too as well. And they really stepped it up in terms of a lot of their really enhanced filtering options, really added a very comprehensive pickup and delivery option scenario. Both Tesco and Publix added, reserve slots for vulnerable customers, early hours and things like that to pick up if you are elderly, et cetera, et cetera. So really interesting. And I invite everybody to kind of dig into this in depth and look at it, and certainly happy to answer any questions you would have around the ranking. So just listed the kind of the top here. So we've broken this into quartiles, and you see each grocer is ranked on their quartile for that particular segment of the buying journey, and who went up and who went down. So I know we have a couple minutes left, so I want to get to a couple of questions, and certainly I think it's important that we get there. So looks like maybe a couple of these disappeared on me. Anyway, so this is actually a good broad question, and we've touched on it, which is, it's been well documented that grocery delivery is largely unprofitable. If that is true, then won't that limit the trend post-pandemic or cause it to reverse? Or do you think the industry will find a way to make it profitable? Who wants to attack that question?
Yeah, I think the question specifically about delivery. Yeah, Jeff, if you want to jump in.
I was going to say, specifically about delivery, I think, it is expensive. It's expensive to do it. And that's why I think you've seen a lot of people that were adopting it very early, because that was the main way of getting groceries where I didn't have to go into a store. But I think now as folks have done, have adapted to curbside pickup, that's becoming the norm. But as I mentioned earlier, if there are solutions out there that can make delivery profitable, it's a great way, to get that to customers, but you have to do it. You have to do it the right way, because for me, I have 3 daughters, and I'm constantly running around a soccer practice. And for me to be home for an hour to receive a delivery, it's next to impossible. So I'm a curbside or in-store customer. But for those millennials who are working from home right now, deliveries is a great option. But you do have to figure out how to make it more profitable. And one of the ways is, creating some competition amongst some of these delivery service providers, and then creating that rules engine to figure out how am I providing the best customer experience for them versus how much is it costing me for that specific delivery service provider. So I think there's a lot of work that still needs to be done there to make that industry as a whole profitable. But those are some things that I think are will have to happen in order to do that.
Excellent. Good feedback. And actually, I should mention, if anybody's interested, we actually did as another portion of this report. It's not part of the published material, but we actually did benchmark all of the third-party delivery companies. And we have a separate report around that. If anybody's interested, you can certainly email me and we'll shoot it your way. So as I said earlier, we have a couple more sessions, one on November 5th around the last mile imperative, and then one on November 17th, which is going to dig into kind of the leaders that are on this leaderboard and some of the things that they do, and we'll dig into that more deeply. So, and we'll have this awesome panel join us again for both. So with that, Sylvain, Jeff, Jack, I really appreciate your expertise here. It's been a really fun hour. And John, I'll turn it back over to you.
Well, great. Thanks very much, David, and the guests for an excellent conversation today. This concludes our webinar. As a reminder, you'll receive an email when the on-demand recording of today's event is available. So on behalf of our sponsors, Mercatus, Flyby, and ShopperKit, thank you for joining us, and I hope you have a great day.